mechanisms, zombies, and so much more.
To the puppet nerds of the world, this may sound absurd, but this is the place you need to be. We'll do an interview and then we'll stitch and glue all of the dolls, we'll make it shake. If you wanna be in the know and to play like a pro, subscribe to Puppet Nerd.
Welcome back, Puppet Nerds. Adam KreatureKid here, and today we're going to talk to Adam Doherty. Adam is head of KreatureKid Studios, and they specialize in making all kinds of special effects, including puppets. They have an amazing project going on right now that you have to hear about. Luckily, I was able to get Adam on a video call for a couple minutes. We got to see things from the project and talk about and see some cool things in their shop. So here's the conversation we had. And make sure to stick around till the end too, because there's a way for you to get your hands onto some of these things from this project. I saw your channel and you just have so many amazing things that you're working on. You're working on all kinds of puppets and whatnot, but they're very like creature-esque. They're all sculpted and cast and molded and things like that. I've seen it go viral in a couple different places before. So when I found your channel, I was like, oh, that's that guy. So that was really cool to kind of to connect with you and discover all your work.
Thank you very much. I've been doing this for a little while. The puppet part of it actually is pretty new. We just finished our first feature film, and that was my dive into actual traditional puppetry and how to build it, and how to figure it out, and all that stuff. Usually, I do animatronics and suits, and working with suit performers and stuff. And then also dealing in the fine art world, a lot of just static fine art sculptures and things like that.
So what do you like about puppets versus doing more of that other creature-esque stuff?
Well, I mean, mainly I just don't like people very much.
That's
so
right.
It's nice to not have to have someone suffering in a suit, or someone, in the makeup chair for hours and hours a day. But I just kind of reconnected with my love of Jim Henson's work and the Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. This is something I've always wanted to do, is figure out how to do puppets.
Puppetry is definitely no cakewalk, but compared to being into those big costume suits with all the makeup and stuff, it is probably a little bit less labor intensive. But you're also right too. Like Jim Henson, well, the thing that's interesting about him is even people look at what I do and say, "Oh, that's Jim Henson style." But the thing about Jim Henson is he had so many styles, like you're talking about. Like you're kind of trying to emulate in a way, partially that inspiration from the Labyrinth and some other shows. And I saw in your other Kickstarter too, trying to emulate like Army of Darkness, the Sam Raimi movies and stuff, which I think is such a cool combination and a great marriage. And I saw some of the previews for your new project you're working on, The Jungle of Darkness, and I was just blown away by some of the work that I was seeing in there. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
Thank you. Yeah, so Jungle of Darkness is my first short film. I'm writing it and directing it and filming it all here in the studio. And it is supposed to be my take on a 1930s jungle adventure, combined with horror, combined with comedy, much like Army of Darkness, much like Labyrinth, and things like Tales from the Crypt or The Storyteller, and kind of combining live performers with puppets, the eeriness of a realistic-looking puppet, as a creature or something like that, and also just a very short and interesting story with a wonderful intro, an action-packed center, and then a hook at the end that makes you want to see more.
That's so cool. One thing I know is people on my channel, they're so fascinated with building and the building process. And you do all your stuff right in-house in that shop you're sitting in, right?
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. That is the lifestyle of artists like us. Same thing for me. Pretty much everything's in this room except for my bandsaw downstairs. But yeah, it's just kind of the lifestyle. And I just know everyone would love to see a little bit of your shop. Can you just talk to us about some of the different tools and things you have lying around your shop?
When you step into the doors of the shop, the entryway is a step into my little time capsule that I call my office and my entryway, where it's I show off some of my work and some of my more darker, more classic pieces. All the front is Victorian. I surround myself with things that inspire me from the past, furniture and art. And a lot of my tools I have are antiques. I have a huge antique tool collection, which I still use, combined with the new DeWalt stuff that we use as a practical shop and stuff like that. But I just love to surround myself with things that inspire me, that remind me of my childhood, that remind me of the past, and that's basically all my work is. It's a conglomerate mishmash of the '90s growing up, and then my love of history, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. One thing that makes I think my work different than the kind of work that you do is the process. Because if you look at all the videos of building puppets on my channel, almost every aspect of work goes into building the final product in some way. Whereas in a lot of what you're doing, you're building essentially tools to create the piece. Like, for example, the mold making process. Mold making is a whole entire time consuming, expensive process that isn't part of the final piece, which is again it's just very different, whereas every single thing that I do almost is building toward that final product in that same way. But can you talk a little bit about your entire process for building one of those characters, specifically one of those zombie type characters that I saw in the main shot?
Well, I think the difference is, like, I have always just been trained as a traditional sculptor, and then transferring the clay into different materials, whether it be foam or silicone or resin or things like that, as opposed to like classic puppetry, which I think is just foam fabricating, right?
Yes, it's for the most part. There's definitely some mold making aspects to it. I mold some of my eyes, and some like Miss Piggy's head is cast in the Muppets and whatnot. But for the most part, the entire puppet is pretty much fabricated. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, me personally, I just think, like, I always do mold making and I always do sculpting because it gives me 100% control on knowing where I want every pore, every wrinkle, every detail, as opposed to if I were to foam fabricate a piece, it's kind of up to what the foam is allowing me to do, what I'm coating it in. I have less precision on, like, because I'm a very slow sculptor, and I find my characters in the clay. That's kind of how I've always been. So I can work on a sculpture for multiple months and evolve the face as I go and kind of figure out the personality and stuff like that. Where foam fabricating is, I don't know, it's a little too free-handy for me. I'm a very I try to find my exact vision, and I want the moles, and I want the wrinkles, and I want scars, and I want that hyper realism of flesh, and stuff like that. And then the mold making process is a very time consuming process, but it's a way to duplicate it exactly how it was multiple times, which is wonderful, and then transferring it into silicone or foam or anything like that, and having an exact replica of what that clay was, but just out of a material now that you can add mechanisms inside. It can stretch, it can pull, it can collapse, and it can kind of start shaping a personality in a thing.
I know one problem I would have if I did a lot of mold making of my puppets is my room here would be stacked with molds everywhere.
And that's this whole wall here. This wall here you can see is just mold upon mold piled up of puppets and torsos and heads and arms and things that didn't work and things that worked, or a mold to transfer it into a different material to then mold it again, or a mold of a core to then cast a core and then have a core inside of another mold. It's a whole stupid process. But
no, I think you did a really good job explaining the difference too. But whereas sculpting like a soft foam, which is something that I tend to do, it's a very subtractive medium. Whereas the clay, again, it's absolutely limitless to create exactly what you want. However, the added detail I'll say is too, you better be a good sculptor, because every little imperfection is going to show up too. I know one thing that people are going to be dying to hear about and to see is a lot of the mechanisms you have going on there. Again, in the trailer that I saw these eyes moving around in such a realistic way. A lot of times with mechanisms that I do and plan on doing, just so you know, people, there's a lot more mechanism videos coming for my channel too. But most of it's kind of blink, maybe a quick side to side. But what you're doing is really, it's more animatronic almost, the way that these eyes move and the way you're incorporating mechanisms. Can you talk a little bit about the process for that? I know people on my channel love learning about mechanisms.
We brought in a mechanic, a young kid named Gus Williams, and I told him what I wanted, and I said we need two servos to operate an eye. So one servo's pulling and pushing, and the other, so together they're making an eye do a full circle, 360, full look around, and I wanted them to be interchangeable for all the heads, so we didn't have to make unique mechanisms for everything. So everything needs to fit inside of a skull. Jim Henson's dinosaurs. I said, watch the show, figure out what they did, watch the behind the scenes. We were pulling up photos online together. We were looking at where the arms are connecting. How did they get the eyebrows to move? What the paddles were, right? And I said, this is the perfect example of a performer in a head with animatronic eyes. And that was the look I wanted to go for all the characters in the movie.
Sometimes people, they ask me about like, oh, how do you do, an eye blink? How do you do one with servos? And one thing that I try to tell people all the time that they don't always realize that the servo is just an actuator. So the process for building it for mechanical with your hand versus a servo is essentially, it's the exact same thing. You're just putting a servo where your hand would be instead. So what you always want to do is make the thing move the way you need it to, and then you attach a servo to it.
Yeah, and a servo was just a push and pull. That's all it is. So you just push and pull with your hand, and you'll know if the eye, when you push, is going that way, pushing and pulling that way, and then this one is pushing and pulling up and down, right?
Yeah, so you're 3D printing a lot of these eyes?
Everything, all the mechs are 3D printed. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Are you printing it in-house, or does your buddy have that too?
We were printing them in-house here. Yeah.
Wow, what kind of printer do you have?
Those were printed on a Prusa for most of it, and then the eyeballs themselves, the balls, we were working with Fourth Seal Studios out in LA on how to do a fitting, because all the eyeballs we installed magnets in, so they can snap onto the mechanisms. But then for transportation and stuff, we could pop the eyeballs out if something needed to be worked on the mech. So that was kind of fun.
Everything that I'm seeing about the Jungle of Darkness looks absolutely awesome. And what's so cool about it too is that people have an opportunity to kind of help fund this with you.
Yeah, so we've already reached our goal, but we have quite a few stretch goals we're trying to reach to unlock rewards that people will get for free, tacked on if we keep reaching stretch goals. But the perks already are pretty wild. We have 3D printed shrunken heads that look like the characters in the movie that are all hand painted here by me and the talented artists, in a bunch of different sizes and different materials, from hard plastic printed one and keychains to squishy foam with real hair to silicone with real hair straight out of the molds that the puppets are going to be cast in. So you can actually get like a movie prop replica exactly from the mold that we're casting our skins for the puppets in, as well as replicas of the Puglu idol, which is like the main treasure in the film, is a golden idol that looks like my little mascot, Puglu.
Wow, that is so cool. Those sound like some awesome perks. So even though you did meet your goal, there's still a lot of reason for people to donate to this. It'll help the production even more funding going into the production, and they get these awesome little keepsakes from the show that as perks. That's amazing.
If we can reach past the 4 stretch goals, there's a kids book prequel to the short film that I'm going to be writing and illustrating myself. If we hit that goal, everyone will get a free kids book, and it'll tell the story of the shrunken heads, Blue and Green, and whatever happened to Pink, who was the 3rd shrunken head that is missing in the film when we interact with the shrunken heads. But it's a story I'm really proud of, and I think people would really love to see it. And we got 5 days left, so any support and any help, it would be wonderful for this project.
So if you guys like any of these awesome perks, definitely check it out before it is too late. Saturday, June 11th is the last day to get these perks and support the show. All right, Adam, thanks so much for coming on. I think people are going to find your stuff so cool and want to support the show. And even if you can't support it at this time, definitely go over to KreatureKid and hit subscribe. He's got a lot of amazing videos over there, and I know you guys are going to love it. Please consider supporting this project. I'm so excited to see this film finished, and I know that this is only the tip of the iceberg. So make sure to follow all of KreatureKid social media so you don't miss any future projects too. And if you want to learn even more about KreatureKid, you won't have to wait too long. We're gonna have Adam back on for a full podcast episode as well. Cameron's out of town at the O'Neill right now, and I wanted to help make sure that we could still support Adam on this project. So the podcast episode will serve more as like an update, and we'll get to see how this whole film turned out. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll see you next time.